me see. All right. Hopefully that works out. What's up, bitches? Okay, can hear that. What's up, everybody? Hey, Nuri, what's up? How you doing? Welcome. Ooh, snazzy. It shows your picture. Cool bean. What's up, yos? How we doing, y'all? Oh, wait. Shoot, hold on. This is not the correct notes. Okay, I see what happened. Alexis, I'm about to print something. Would you mind handing it to me when it comes through? Thank you so much. It's so nice to have help, you guys. Life is just so much better when you're not alone. Okay. Let's do this. Really? It's not getting any smaller? Okay, never mind. All right. Okay, I've got old show notes here. So we're getting some new show notes printed up. What's up, you guys? I'm excited. Hey, Nisi, how we doing? Oh, hi. Got it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here on either account. I appreciate you being in the room so we can have this chat. Oh, shoot. One more other thing. I'll ask Alexis when she comes in. If you don't know what's going on here, we are coming together once again to record an episode of the BetterWitch podcast. This is an episode that will be airing on podcast platforms for season 3 in the spring. But one of the benefits of being here and a part of my YouTube community is you are able to tune into the behind the scenes filming. You get to see these episodes early. Would you mind also bringing me a copy of David's book? We should have a few on the shelf. Thank you. You guys get to watch these episodes in live time when they're happening. You get to see all of the background administrative stuff that's going on. You also get to ask questions. So that's really cool. Just get the whole experience. And then, of course, if you do want to listen in, thank you, to this episode, once it's all edited and pretty and all that good stuff, it will be available on major podcast platforms when season 3 drops in the spring. Nisi's excited about it. Me too. I will let you guys know that there is a Q&A box if you're tuning in on YouTube. There is a Q&A box that you can drop your questions into. You can also drop your questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to go back and catch any. But if you want to make sure that your question gets answered and it's not missed, there is a Q&A box to make sure that I absolutely see the question. We will present these questions to our guest today, David Shee, when we get to the end of our recording session. So if you can't stick around for the entire show, that is a great way to still make sure you get your question answered, because you can always come back and watch the replay, go to the end, and see your question get answered. Trying to get through your last hour of work? Power through, you can do it. I will be, I'm here at the shop. Then I've got some readings in the evening. Then after that, I will be live with the Coven Community Witches exclusively to have a little high tea and to talk about how we incorporate magic into our everyday lives, which is an ongoing theme with us, but we're going to focus specifically on planner making, how to turn your regular planner into a witchy planner, or how to keep a witchy planner to make sure that holidays, full moons, rituals, and things like that are not things that you are constantly forgetting to engage in or finding out about at the last minute, stuff like that. Okay, cool beans. Let me see if there's any banners. Sweet. Okay. Let me know if you guys can hear me and see me okay. I'm doing some different things with the lighting, and check it out. I got a snazzy purple cover for my mic. Isn't she cute? Branding. Pull this light a little bit better. I don't know that made a difference. Let me see. Let me drop it down to my face, actually. I want to have it too in my face because, when you wear glasses, it can be like cute, but let's see, maybe right in front of me. Okay, yeah, not so in shadow. Okay, and yeah, I like having the mic in the view because it makes me feel podcasty. Okay, so don't judge me. I know it's corny, but it makes me feel like a real podcaster. Okay, same with the headphones. I probably don't need them. I told you guys up until like 2 filmings ago, wasn't even using them right. Couldn't hear shit out of them, and I didn't know that I was supposed to. Yeah, you got the Witch's Diary. Good. Yeah, we're going to go all through how to plan your year and all of that good stuff tonight. So if you're watching this recording right now, you still have time to join the Coven. The Coven is what we call like the cafeteria on campus. It is our membership only space inside of the HQ online portal. The HQ online portal is where you can find all of our virtual classes and digital downloads, but there's also a community space that you can join where you can have conversations with other witches and tune into exclusive classes, workshops, lives, and all of that good stuff. It's not just me in there. It's also a community of witches, many of whom you have met either coming into the shop or checking us out on Instagram or TikTok. These are the Witches of HQ. And they are also buzzing about in the Coven community, leaving posts, giving exclusive offerings, going live for different things. So you get access to a world of what is now about 89 or 90 witches. So if you are looking to find a witchy community that is right for you, then our Coven community might be the right space. And the Coven community witches are going to get to, get high with me tonight and do some planner making. So, all right. So our guest should be with us shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and read our intro so we are ready to rock when they get here. And I should probably, let me grab a pen. And where do I want to do commercial? Actually, I don't know if we're going to do that anymore. Yeah, I don't know if we're going to do that anymore. We'll see. Hey, Jeanette, welcome. All right, let's hit the intro, and then I'm going to decide if we're going to do a commercial break. I don't know that we're going to do that commercial break we used to do. I know people like that, having the co-host kick to the commercial break, but trying to make things a little bit smoother of a process for editing for myself. So I think we might do any of that type of stuff at the start of the episode. Okay. All right. Does it sound staticky? Is that me? I hear some static. I should also. Oh, you know what? That was happening with the when the internet was low, and then as soon as it popped back up, that stopped. So that is good to know because searching for internet might impact it. All right, let's do this intro. Ready? Intro, take one. What's up, witches? Welcome to season 3 of the BetterWitch podcast, presented by the Beyond BronxWitch YouTube channel. I'm your host, Alysha Kravetz. I'm a tarot reader, Reiki master, and owner of BronxWitch HeadQuarters, a spiritual shop and workshare space in the Bronx, New York. This season, I'll be coming to you every week with a new topic and a new guest co-host to share our real life experiences as practicing witches. Because when we know better, we witch better. Today's guest co-host is David Shi. David is a shamanic worker and folk magic practitioner who practices traditional North Asian forms of shamanism. He is primarily of Manchurian descent, but can also trace ancestry to Mongolian, Chinese, Korean, as well as a little Tungus, Siberian, and ancient Central Asian Turkic heritage as well. Recognized as both a Sagasha and Ongontengerti, a future shaman prior to initiation among both Mongolian and Korean shamans, David's practices are deeply rooted in spirit work, in which ancestral and land spirits are called to empower all workings. David's readings incorporate a combination of tarot, bones, jahorp, as well as Mongolian stone divination, known as kumalak in Turkic Central Asia. David is the author of the new book, Spirit Voices, The Mysteries and Magic of North Asian Shamanism, and currently resides in Manhattan, New York, where he occasionally provides spiritual services, products, and workshops to his immediate communities. You can follow David on Instagram at DavidJShi311. Okay. Sagasha Ongadtengerti. Ongadtengerti, I think is how you say that. We're going to ask David for clarification, but I think it's Sagasha and Ongadtengerti. I hope so. Oh, perfect. Perfect timing. David is coming in the building, so he is going to help me with the pronunciations. All right. Awesome. Let's say hi. Hey, David. How are you?
Hey, Ali, I'm good. How are you?
I am great. It is so good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. We are just chilling in here with a few folks who are checking us out on YouTube right now. And I was just going through your intro. I like to do that before we get into the conversation, so we're not, spending a lot of time dilly-dallying with that. But I wanted to ask for some assistance with the pronunciation
Okay.
in your bio. So, Sagasha, did
Yeah,
I get
that's
that
right.
right? Okay. And then Onga Tengerti?
Ongo Tengerte.
Ongo Tengerte.
Yeah.
Ongo Tengerte. Okay, that's
Mhm.
awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so, so much. So if you don't mind, Ongo Tengerte.
Mhm.
Okay. I am going to run through the intro one more time just so I
Sure.
get that right for the future recording and all that good stuff. So
Mhm.
bear with me while I be annoying and totally embarrass you and read your bio right in front of your face, okay?
All right. Let's do it.
Okay, one more time. Ongo Tengerte.
Yeah.
Ongo Tengerte. All right, great. Give me 1 second. What's up, witches? Welcome to season 3 of the BetterWitch podcast, presented by the Beyond BronxWitch YouTube channel. I'm your host, Alysha Kravetz. I'm a tarot reader, Reiki master, and owner of BronxWitch HeadQuarters, a spiritual shop and workshare space in the Bronx, New York. This season, I'll be coming to you every week with a new topic and a new guest co host to share our real life experiences as practicing witches. Because when we know better, we witch better. Today's guest co host is David Shi. David is a shamanic worker and folk magic practitioner who practices traditional North Asian forms of shamanism. He is primarily of Manchurian descent, but can also trace ancestry to Mongolian, Chinese, Korean, as well as a little Tungus Siberian and ancient Central Asian Turkic heritage as well. Recognized as a Sagasha and Ongotengertei, a future shaman prior to initiation among both Mongolian and Korean shamans, David's practices are deeply rooted in spirit work in which ancestral and land spirits are called to empower all workings. David's readings incorporate a combination of tarot, bones, jaharp, as well as Mongolian stone divination, known as kumalak, in Turkic Central Asia. David is the author of the new book, Spirit Voices The Mysteries and Magic of North Asian Shamanism, and currently resides in Manhattan, New York, where he occasionally provides spiritual services, products, and workshops to his immediate communities. You can follow David on Instagram at DavidJShe311. All right, cool. Thank you. Thank you for your patience and your help with that. Yeah, so how are you doing today?
Not bad. It's, pretty cloudy and rainy day, so, it's I'm thankful I've been working from home.
Yeah, amen to that, right? That's
Yeah.
always nice for folks. It's a different world that we live in, a lot more working from home. And I certainly have come to really appreciate the opportunity to do it. And I also feel a little bit bamboozled because I'm like, you guys could have probably always had us working from home.
Oh
Like,
yeah, totally. Definitely true.
like, hey, you know what I mean? So, but what can you do, right? It's good that we have figured that out now. So we have that option for folks. And I feel like rainy days are like the witchiest days. I personally enjoy a rainy day, but it's definitely a little more enjoyable when you get to be inside for it, for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, to start, I'll let you know a little bit about this process and how it all works and what you can expect and all that good stuff. So, we are live right now on the Beyond BronxWitch YouTube channel. This is a bit of a treat for my YouTube viewers. They get to see these episodes actually get recorded in real time. So, they get to see all the behind the scenes nonsense. The dog starts barking, someone rings the doorbell, all that good stuff. And then the episode is edited for later broadcasts on podcast platforms. And we have had a little bit of a delay in getting season 3 out, but I'm now expecting it to be on podcast platforms in the spring, somewhere around the equinox, probably. So I'll definitely reach out to you when that happens so you can tune into your episode. But this episode will be on my YouTube channel. You can always let people know they can catch the behind the scenes as a replay if they ever want to check it out. But one of the benefits of being able to do it like this is it means that we can edit anything out or change anything later on if we need to. So if, like I said, the doorbell rings or the dog starts barking, no worries, no stress. All of that can be taken out later on. And if anything changes with your bio or there's something else that you want me to mention, you can send that along to me as well. And we can do our best to try to add it into the podcast version of the episode. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Now, I don't think I remembered to click the little button for local recording, so it shouldn't be an issue. But when we are done today, if you see any alerts on your screen that say, don't leave yet, please don't leave. Leave your browser open for a few minutes to let anything that's like uploading finish its uploading. I think we should be okay today, but just in case you see anything like that, if you don't mind leaving your browser open, I definitely very much appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, cool. And then I think the last thing, or two last things. One, halfway through our chat, I'm probably going to give a little bit of a pause for a little bit of a commercial break, if you don't mind. And then at the very end of our conversation, I would love to take a couple of questions from our YouTube audience. Another perk to being able to tune into the episode live on YouTube. Folks are being instructed to drop some questions in the Q&A box on YouTube, which you can find at the top of your chat. Or if you're on a device where you can't find it, feel free to drop your question in the chat and just know that we will scroll back and get to it at the end of the episode. So if you can't stick around for this entire taping, please do drop your question and you could always come back to the replay to hear the answer to your question. So don't be shy. You can drop your questions in there and we will make sure to get to them. All right. So I'm excited. And one of the reasons I'm excited is because this is the second time we have had this happen where we are sitting down to speak with an esteemed witch in the community who is also going to be coming to HQ for a book signing. So this is kind of like a sneak peek preview for folks who are getting tickets or planning on tuning in to the book signing. But David has an amazing new book called Spirit Voices, The Mysteries and Magic of North Asian Shamanism. And David is going to be in-house, not only to sign copies of your book, but to treat us to a private chat. So if you are interested in coming by, if you're local and want to come to the shop, we're going to be hosting this book signing on Saturday, February 10th from 1 to 3 p.m. From 1 to 2, we have a private, intimate chat with David. Seats are limited. Tickets to that are limited. If you get a VIP ticket to the private chat, you will receive a signed copy of the book. There'll be complimentary refreshments, and David is going to treat us to readings of some excerpts from the book, as well as a Q&A, be able to answer any questions and basically just hang out with us. And then from 2 to 3, which is totally open to the public, free general admissions tickets are available to that portion of the day. If you come in with a general admission ticket, you won't be able to sit in on the private chat or enjoy the yummy goodies in the refreshments bar, but you will be able to get a moment with David to sign a copy of your book, which you're welcome to bring with you. Or if you don't have one, we will have copies available at the shop for purchase. So if you're in the area, definitely come on down, especially if you've never been to HQ. This is a great time to do so. Check out the shop, but also mingle with your fellow witches and get the opportunity to meet David. For those of you who are Coven community witches, one of the many perks of being a member is that you get free access to the live stream of our events. So we will be live streaming the private chat, get a little behind the scenes, and you guys get free access to that. right in the events tab. You can tune in and experience it. So if you don't live nearby and you would like to participate in the book signing, that's a great way to do it. Become a Coven Community Witch, and you'll be able to watch the live stream just like you're in the room. So I hope to see all of you either in person or in the stream room on Saturday, February 10th. And because we're giving people this preview, I kind of want to start it a little bit with the basics, if you don't mind, David.
Mm-hmm.
So this is probably like a little bit boring because it's a little bit 101, but I do think it's important that we start with the foundations because every time I think of the word shaman,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, these days, I have horrific flashbacks to January 6th.
Oh no.
And some rogue Caucasian with hides upon his head running around calling himself a shaman. And I am bummed because I think that's probably what a lot of people, at least in this country, think of when they hear that word too now. And even before that, when they heard the word shaman, while they may not have been thinking of that dude, they probably had some other misguided idea of what a shaman is. So I do want to start with the basics, if you don't mind, and
Sure.
just start with what exactly is a shaman, from at least from your perspective and what you know as an actual practitioner of this type of work.
I'm so glad you brought it up because if you didn't, I would have.
Yeah, because
um,
that guy.
yeah. So to put it blunt, yeah, the word shaman is probably one of the most misunderstood words in the English language. It's not even from the English language.
Okay.
So the word shaman, it comes from a specific group of tribes in Siberia. And it has actually a very specific meaning in those tribes. So the meaning is that a shaman is a person who was chosen by ancestral shamanic spirits when they were born to act as both the vessel and the bridge between the spirit world and the physical world, in which they are empowered to be able to do two things. First thing is transpossession by the shamanic ancestral spirits. And the second thing is we call it spirit flight, in which your own soul is that then escorted by your shamanic spirits outside your body to go into the spirit world and to do various things. Now, aspects of that definition are going to sound familiar to many different spiritualities around the world. I mean, a lot of people nowadays are familiar with transpossession.
Right.
Or they might call it mediumship or whatever. But
Right.
one of the key differences with a shaman is that it's a lot of people, especially in the Western world, when they see that definition, they focus a lot on what a shaman does, but that's not the key part of the definition. The key
Oh.
part is actually the fact that the shaman was chosen by specific spirits when they are born, and with part of this being chosen is that they are empowered to do certain spiritual practices that are otherwise very risky, and
Mhm.
and because the, and but at the same time, because they are chosen, traditionally the implication is if you are chosen to be a shaman, this is something you have to do within your life. That's basically, you can't get away from it, or you will be punished by your own
Wow.
spirits. So there is very much one of the biggest differences that I actually tell people between shamanic practice and witchcraft practice is that in shamanic practice, it is a responsibility and obligation that you must serve the community around you. Basically, in some ways, almost sacrificing yourself in the process. Where
Mm.
in the witchcraft practice, I mean, a lot of witches, especially witches who are very public, they still help their communities, but the core of it is more about empowerment and sovereignty and yourself, very much so.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of that difference. So this is why, and the reason why the word shaman gets very misunderstood and misinterpreted is very much because of history. The word shaman actually came to the Western languages through Russia, because the first peoples to encounter the North Asian tribes were Russian and Dutch explorers. They learned this word, they brought it into Europe, and then that word became almost like an exotic word at the time. It was learned by the French, their closest allies. It was learned by the English and the Spanish. And guess which one of those had the largest colonial empires in the world? All of them. So
Right.
what happened is they went around the world, and they encountered spiritual practitioners and elders from all of these different traditional indigenous societies, and they did not want to refer to those people with, words like priest or holy man or anything that implies a connection to Christianity. They want to use as far away a distant word as possible, and the only word they knew at the time was what they heard from the Russians, was shaman. So they went around the world, whether it's in North America, in South America, in Africa, in Southeast Asia. Anytime they came across a spiritual elder of any kind, they just used the word shaman. And so that's the root of why the word is so misunderstood, when in the actual original tribes that had this word, there was a very specific meaning to it. And actually, there's also funny thing, there is actually almost a gendered meaning, because within these group of tribes, the word shaman, or saman as it was pronounced, actually referred to the male counterpart of the practice. The female counterpart actually had a different word, udkan. And the funny thing, I actually talk about this in chapter 1 of my book, is that only a couple group of tribes actually use the word saman, but almost all of North Asia used the word udkan to some extent or variation. So if anything, that actually does tell us that shamanic practice was very much, it originated with women, and it originated with the women of these tribes. That's why their words are so similar. And as these tribes separated and started to do their own things, as male practitioners popped up, aka the sons and grandsons of the original women, then they start to develop individual words for the male equivalent. So almost across all of North Asia, the word for a male shaman actually is very, very different across every tribe, but the word for a female shaman is almost exactly the same.
Okay, well, listen, one of our community members, Nisi, just said you just snatched her edges with that info. And I don't know if you're familiar with that phrase, David, but it means we're shocked. It means we're shocked. Because, yeah, that just absolutely snatched my edges too, honey. That is news to me. Really, everything that you just said is so different from what I would think I know about who a shaman is, or where it even originates from. Certainly where it originates from, because I think for many of us living in North America, when we think about shaman, we think about Native American or American indigenous practitioners. It's only recently in my own, educating myself, just speaking to more people, realizing that's a word that Native American or North American indigenous folks would not use to refer to their spiritual leaders and elders, that they would have their own local terms that would be in their own languages, and that this is really a blanket term that has been applied to all of those people by Westerners and by Europeans and folks outside of those cultures who, like you said, saw their practices, didn't want to call them priests or anything like that, and said, okay, well, that's a shaman. And so now I think a lot of Americans hear that word and think about North American indigenous practitioners, but that's totally not what a shaman is in terms of its origins.
And because of the internet, a lot of us have actually interacted with, elders from North American indigenous practices. And, like you said, it pretty much agreed. None of the tribes have that word in their language. They actually have many words for various spiritual roles.
Right.
Some of them are close to what we would call shamanism, not exact 100%, but pretty close. But even so, I think this is because there is no easy blanket word. I mean, there never was, but nowadays people try to have an easy blanket word. And I think it was during like the 80s to the 90s, various North American indigenous tribes got together and they tried to they start in the English language, they start referring to their own practices as medicine practices to try to identify with something that was uniquely North American indigenous. But then, you know, with people being people, a lot of people ultimately like, oh, medicine practice or medicine man means shaman, which no, that phrase was invented to separate from that.
Right. And then I think the other thing that's shocking to everyone listening is the gendered nature of the origin of the word and the concept of a shaman or is it saman?
Yeah.
Saman being the male counterpart to a role that was maybe originally or at least primarily served by the women or female identifying members of the community, because we definitely think of shamans as male spiritual leaders. We have this image, you know, that Hollywood has certainly perpetuated of the American indigenous man who goes out into the woods and is tripping on some type of, you know, plant medicine and, you know, sees a bunch of like wolves and unicorns and comes back with messages. But it's almost always a male that plays that role, or the person who is like going on some type of spiritual journey and, you know, finds out that they're called to this path is usually a male character. So that is fascinating. And I think it's also interesting because that's a story that I feel like we keep hearing about when you look at really cultures all over the world, that the first healers, the first spiritual diviners, the first members of the communities that served this particular type of role were usually the women in the communities. And it was only over time that it became either, you know, dual gender played role or completely something that was seen as patriarchal. I was actually just reading through, I think it's in volume 2, but I'm sure she talks about it in volume 1 as well. Mama Zogboy, who is the author of the Mami Wata papers and texts, very, very thick text, very historical text to get through. But if the viewers and listeners are ever in the mood to like really get nerdy, check out these books. But something that Mama Zogboy talks about is that the African cultures that honor Mami Wata, it's only in the last 6,000 years that the practitioners of these practices were seen as patriarchal, or that their villages and structures were patriarchal. Before that, we really had a much more matriarchal structure. And this seems to be a story that I'm hearing all over the place. And I'm curious as to like maybe how that manifests now. Do you see a return to that as people educate themselves on the true origins of shamanism, or even the cultures from which we get these words? Has there been a shift for them to these roles being served mostly by men, or are they still kind of practicing it with kind of women at the forefront?
Well, these practices are very much lineage based. So at this point, especially within North Asia right now, it's really about 50-50 in terms of, you know, practices. It's generally what is known and what is accepted is that on average, female women shamans were actually on average tend to be more powerful than the men, but the women's power also ebbs and flows with, you know, the to put it bluntly, the time of the month.
Right.
So because of that, you know, women are at the same time more powerful and more vulnerable at the same time, whereas the men are weaker but less vulnerable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does
Yeah.
make sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. The next time I go on a date, I'm going to mention that. Like, I may be more vulnerable, but I am more powerful. Yeah. No, I agree. I see that dichotomy, like I said, in other cultures as well, where there is some sort of like innate or inherent power that the female members of each individual society has, but there's also a vulnerability related to their physiology and their biology and the role as child bearers and things like that, that kind of, in some way I almost feel like this is the micro of the macro, in that in the universe we have this yin and yang, we have this balance of two different forces, and that is in our own human biology just a reflection of that. That we are, two sides of one coin, or however you want to put it, but that there is both a strength and a weakness of both of the sexes. And it's so interesting that we have become, I think, so saturated with the dominance of the male in our society, because I think a lot of people are starting to see, if not champion for, a shift of a return to, if not a prevalence of the divine feminine in our world, but at least a better balance, because we seem to have been kind of out of whack for centuries now, and not so sure that that's been serving us well, honestly.
One hilarious way that the recognition of this balance actually plays out is actually with a friend of mine who is a traditional shaman. Both she and her husband are both traditional shamans. So it's really funny. There will be, certain times where, or even like a week within a month, where she'll be like, oh, I can't do the spiritual practice right now. Hey, husband, cover my clients.
Yeah, nice. That's a great balance. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I like that. They can tag team like that together. There were two things that you mentioned kind of at the top that were like already on my list of like things to chat about. So I'm glad that you introed us in these topics. And the first one is the origins of a shaman, because I did want to talk about how one can become a shaman or what that process is. But you alluded to there being a divine origin, essentially, that being a shaman is something that is chosen for you, not so much that you choose for yourself. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. How do I know that I've been chosen for that? Is it sort of automatic to being born in a certain place or having connections to certain ancestry? Is there a test? Is there a reading I could get to find out? How does someone even, first of all, if you could talk a little bit more about the idea of like having it be born, because I got to tell you, in the witching world, as you pointed out, people get a little pissed when you tell them that they can't do stuff. Everybody wants to hear that, like, I can do this if I'm chosen. And if you say you have to be born with this, or this has to be something that you carry with you, then you're a gatekeeper and you're just trying to keep people out and you're being exclusive, and how horrible. So I do want to talk about that a little bit, because I obviously don't agree. I do believe that different cultures and different practices are things that we carry with us to some extent. And there are lots of practices that are open to all of us, but that there are some things that are not, and that's okay too. So if you could talk a little bit more about that, that would be great. But then if you could expand and let us know how we would know if we did in fact carry that, I think folks would be really interested in knowing that.
So a couple things I do want to sort of lay on the ground first is that shamanic practice is a type of spiritual, even within these cultures, it is a type of spiritual practice based off of the relationships you have with witch spirits. So the reason why I say that within our definition, shamans technically are chosen is because part of it's really, so it is, to put it bluntly, ancestral lineage, because the shamanic spirits that choose you are specific ancestors who themselves were shamans as well. So this is how the lineages kind of passed down. And the reason, but that being said, everyone is entitled to be able to do spiritual work and to do magical work. Shamanism in the traditional sense implies a very specific, almost forced intimate relationship with specific spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And actually it's off, I'll be blunt, within our cultures, it's often seen as a curse, or
Wow.
like a family curse,
Right.
because it basically dictates what sort of spiritual relationships you can have, as well as the directions that things go in your life. So actually, like, I know it can sound gatekeeper-ish, or it can sound like, oh, like, you can't do this. But honestly, if you are chosen to do this, there's a lot of other things that you then cannot also do.
Mm.
It's like, for example, it's I cannot have other spirits or gods above the specific and shamanic spirits that I have. It's gotten to the point where, funny story, in the past when I've gone to, like, rituals or circles by witches, by pagans and such, the message that I would get from, whichever gods they called down, were always like, thank you for being here, we appreciate you being here, but just to let you know, this is not what you're supposed to be doing.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, so basically it's, um and the reason why, this type of practice even appears in the world is because, frankly, within North Asia, our gods, and I say this as gods because the equivalent of gods, of really higher powers, are not nearly as available to us as some of the other spirits and gods are in other places of the world. Whether it's various European or various even various African spiritualities, their gods and spirits are very much available, sometimes a little bit too much so, looking at Greek mythology, but,
Right.
they are
Right.
very involved in, human affairs.
Yeah.
Whereas within North Asia, I'll be honest, most people in North Asia don't necessarily even know, like, a lot of their gods because they're just not available. So what happens with, the people when they need, like, when they need spiritual hygiene, or they need spiritual practice, when it becomes a necessary part of life, what happens essentially, ancestral spirits come to fulfill the role, and specific ancestral spirits come to fill the role. So I guess to answer part of your question, kind of going back to it a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
um, the way that, shamanic practice traditionally would appear is actually through what I assume it could appear through what everyone is, like, here is already doing, that they're engaged in deep spiritual practice and deep magical practice. And over time, as the various generations have a respect or honor or a devoted practice, eventually, as to put in this way, when we become ancestors,
Mm-hmm.
we we have the option of engaging with our descendants and choosing to engage our descendants in such an intimate way, semi bordering on a forced way, but basically, choose we have if we maintain spiritual practice, then we have that option as ancestral spirits to be able to choose descendants, let them
Mm.
know through various signs and such that, we choose them to be able to engage in this type of intimate work, and we serve that relationship. So basically, it's, as spiritual practitioners, it's almost more possible for us to become shamanic spirits than it is for us to become shamans, if that kind of makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's more possible to be chosen than it is to um, choose it for yourself, I guess.
right. So, and so, it's, so how would you know if, you are chosen? Well, I mean, there's going to be a lot of signs, and one thing I've noticed that was very interesting is that a lot of the signs for to identify people who are chosen by spirits are oftentimes similar, not exactly the same, but similar to traditionally what people said the signs were of witchcraft.
Oh.
Various marks on the body, personality traits, behavioral traits, all that things. But these are just signs. They could mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
The real way to know for sure is to be able to engage with a traditional elder and have them essentially check you and diagnose you. and see what your condition is. Like for myself, I was interested in this practice for a long time. I didn't know why, because the more I read about it, the more it sounded awful to me. But I was interested in it.
Right.
And so when I actually did engage with, traditional shamans and elders across both Mongolia and Korea, who both have these traditions, then they actually broke it down to me that they actually said that you have ongo tengers, basically shamanic ancestral spirits, who have chosen you to do this type of work. I am very blessed in that my spirits are not as demanding or petty, because sometimes they very much can
Not
be.
petty.
Because they've given me a lot of flexibility in how I pursue it, even knowing that I have to. There are some people with very demanding spirits, because shamanic spirits, they're not enlightened beings. They can still hold on to a lot of, they can hold on to baggage and trauma, but they can also hold on to very weird personalities, or weird, like rigid traditional personalities. So I have two ancestral shamanic spirits that I work with primarily. They are both very much the grandmother type, so I'm very happy with that.
How nice. Nice. Yeah. No, so that's I'm glad that you describe it that way, because I think that that is something, especially for new practitioners, just anybody kind of dabbling in spirituality to start out. We do talk a lot about the importance of ancestral connection, and how connecting with your ancestral spirits is really a great, entryway into any type of spirit work, because for a whole host of reasons, they're easier to identify. You may have actually known them when they were alive. So when you encounter them in spirit form, you know that you're talking to them versus somebody else. Because they are directly related to you, they tend to have more of a personal interest in your well-being, and can serve as protectors on the other side, guides on the other side. So there's a whole host of reasons why practitioners advise newer folks entering into spiritual practices to start with their ancestral spirits. But one thing that I think some folks sometimes have a misconception about is the idea that an ancestor, just by definition, is like some elevated, angelic, kind, wonderful, warm, only in the light, goodness type of a being. And people usually have to be educated or reminded that, like, no, remember how grandpa died a raging alcoholic? So, like, grandpa's spirit may not necessarily be an alcoholic per se, but the vibration where grandpa was when he returned into the ether might still essentially be the nature of that energy when you interact with him in the spiritual. And there is in Santeria and Lukumi, there is a concept of folks being what is called a caballo, which is a Spanish word for horse. This is somebody who has come here with a particular sensitivity to spirit, and the ability to what some people might call being possessed by various spirits, for the purpose of serving as like a communicator for them, to deliver messages and things like that. And I happen to know somebody who is a caballo, and she likes to say to people, all of our ancestors should be prayed for, not necessarily prayed to. So we have well wishes for all of them. We pray for their enlightenment. We pray for their evolution. But they are not all in a place where going to them for guidance, support, etc., would be necessarily advised, for this very reason, that they're not necessarily, these just like, innocent light beings that we might like to think of them, that they're a little bit more real.
Right.
And they have their own distinctions, and some of those qualities and traits might be a little harder to deal with than others. So I am also glad to hear that your spirits are more grandmotherly.
Well, the ones that I work with, I do have one that I've been advised to not work with.
Some cranky pants? Got some cranky pants?
Apparently causing a lot of problems with the men in my family. So, yeah, so I've been told to avoid that one.
Okay, all right. Good. Well, so it's good that you can. So you have that option, right? You mentioned that it's something that you're born with, but that oftentimes it's something that people don't necessarily want to really step into because of some of the restrictions or some of the demands that might be
So
put on them.
So to clarify, I mean, I was chosen by, ancestral shamanic spirits, but I don't necessarily have to work with all of them, but I do need to work with at least one.
Yeah, in
So,
general.
so for
Okay.
some people who are in a place where unfortunately they only have the one and they're a little bit more problematic, then their life is a little bit more of an obstacle course. But part of our process is that we learn various techniques and we learn various practices so that as we personally become stronger, we are less reliant on them. So
Okay.
that's when someone achieves like essentially what elders have, because so a lot of the elder shamans, they don't need to call their ancestral spirits nearly as often as the younger ones do. um
Oh, okay.
but that's because they had to go through that within their lifetimes. So um yeah, so I do want to also just mention that with ancestral spirits, as you mentioned, we don't necessarily call to all of them for help. Actually, because we believe in reincarnation, we don't even believe that all of them are necessarily available in spirit form.
Right.
So I one of the most common questions I get, I'm sorry to divert the conversation a little
No,
bit,
please,
but
please.
one of the questions I get is, how do you find which ones are, the ones that are willing to be, support, to have supports and willing to, help their descendants. And sometimes, and it is pretty oftentimes pretty tricky if you're not able to find out through, divination or just knowing which ones specifically are the ones that are helpful, which is why we have the concepts of a, how do I put it, a almost like a bloodline guardian or a household guardian spirit. Basically, it's we to us we call it like a household fire spirit, which is attached to your bloodline lineage, who serves as the protector. And often through that means you can be able to then access ancestral support and strength. And then eventually, then as you become more experienced and more practiced, you'll be able to then better identify which specific ancestral spirits are the ones that are showing up, that are good to work with.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying and walking us through that.
Mhm.
I think that now would probably be a good time for our commercial break. I've got
Mhm.
a few more questions that I want to ask you, and I want to open up the conversation to our viewers to ask some questions as well. So if you want to step away, if you want to,
Yeah,
shake it off, you can take a little bit of a break. I'm going to be reading some stuff to our viewers here, and you can hang out for that, or you can,
all right,
take a little bit of a break. Okay.
sounds
We'll be
good.
back
Mhm.
in just a second with more from David Chi. All right, folks. Oh, let's take a stretch there. Stretch our little witchy wings out. This is an amazing conversation. Thank you, everyone who is tuning in. If you don't know what's going on here, you are watching a behind the scenes taping of season 3 of the Better Witch podcast with me, Alysha Kravetz, aka BronxWitch. These episodes will be airing on major podcast platforms in the spring, so stay tuned for that. This is an opportunity for you guys to get to see how these episodes come together, as well as to make sure that you get your questions answered. So, are you ready to level up from Baby Witch to Better Witch? Enroll in my 6-month Better Witch Magic Intensive Coaching Program. Unveil the power of self realization, meditation, spellcasting, and more. Elevate your practice with 22 weeks of live classes and one-on-one sessions with me, Alysha Kravetz. Plus, enjoy exclusive perks, including almost $1,000 in savings on magical products and services, as well as the BetterWitch Magic Intensive Kit, which contains over $200 worth of tools and goodies to help you on your Better Witch journey. Don't miss your chance to become a better witch. The enrollment period for the next 6-month session is February 1st through February 7th, 2024. And you can learn more now at bronxwitch.com/coaching. All right. All right. Can you guys let me know if you heard the talking in the background? I think someone popped into the back of the shop for a second, but my microphone should block some of that out, but let me know if you heard it and if it was distracting at all. We'll run through that one more time. Oh yeah, you guys didn't know you work in these sessions. So if you're new here, y'all work. Okay, so if you're gonna tune in, you're like all my producers. So let me know if that was smooth or if you heard talking. You didn't hear anyone, says Nuri. Awesome, thank you. All right, great. Awesome. Yay. The microphone works. Cool beans. Okay. All right, we're going to welcome David back into the room and continue on with our conversation. Welcome back, David. Welcome back, everyone, from that break. Thank you so much for continuing on with this conversation with us. So I wanted to talk about initiations and formal procedures and processes, because we talked a little bit about your experience of going to Mongolia, to Korea, speaking with elders, and how if someone suspects that they're a shaman or that they might be called to this work, that would be the way to get that verified, to sit with an elder who can confirm that there are in fact shamanic ancestral spirits in this person's lineage that want them to step into this work. Once that happens, what do you do? Is there a process? Is there a ceremony? Do you get a party thrown? Do you have to, travel through the woods for, a day and a year or a year and a day? What then happens? And is it automatic? Is it formal? Or is it kind of something you now make up for yourself?
Right. So that's a bit of a complex question because every tribe does something different.
Okay.
It's basically, if there's a universal aspect of what then happens next, there is an initiation ceremony, which sometimes I've come across people who call it a tying ceremony or sealing ceremony, basically where the elder shaman basically almost like ties or binds you and your main shamanic spirit closer. Basically, the whole purpose of initiation is to help facilitate and strengthen the connection between the shaman and their spirit. Because ultimately, I think all these traditions agree, ultimately your teacher is your spirits, but you need a physical human teacher to then teach you how to connect with that spirit. So right. So you kind of need, so you need ultimately you need a physical teacher of some kind, of basically some kind. And in some traditions, you essentially serve as the elder shaman's apprentice, where you kind of do sort of help them with their everyday, chores and stuff. And in exchange, they, help you develop your own connection, your own strength, your own power. And every group, every tribe does this a little bit differently. Sometimes the ceremony itself, it's just, few hours, sometimes it's a few days. The most intense is actually the Koreans. Theirs is like 1 to 2 weeks.
Wow.
Theirs is also the most expensive by far. The Mongolian shamans are shocked when they hear about stuff that Korean shamans do. Yeah, it's but yeah, it's basically there's the actual ceremony, and then there's the teaching process. Now, in some traditions, you have that sort of one dedicated human teacher. And in some other tribes, it's almost like a mentorship with multiple elders. So basically, what happens is the ceremony itself kind of, in a way, ties you to your main shamanic spirit that is closer, and then after that, it's almost like a training process. And so it's like in simple terms, that's what it is. One thing that I will say that one of my close friends, the shaman in Mongolia, for me, she is unable to do an initiation ceremony with me specifically, and it's for a very interesting reason. It's because ethnically, as you said in my introduction, I am primarily Manchurian, with some Mongol blood, with some other blood, but primarily I am Manchurian. She is from a tribe of Mongols called the Darkhat tribe. And funny thing is, several hundred years ago, her tribe and my people were enemies.
Oh no.
You see where this is going. If you
Yeah.
in a ceremony, if you're calling my ancestors and her ancestors together, that's in the same room.
We call that Bronx Brooklyn beef. Yeah.
so literally, she was like, I can't do this for you for the sake of both our lives.
Right. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's intense.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's even been some ceremony when I traveled with her to various places in Mongolia. There were several ceremonies that she had to do that I could not attend, actually, for a very similar reason. She actually asked her elder if I could attend some of those ceremonies, and his response was, "Do you like him or do you want to kill him? If you want to kill him, bring him along."
Right. It's
Yeah.
that dangerous
Yeah.
to have that. Wow. So I can see pretty readily from that how important it is to have an experienced guide in the physical. Like, yes, they're ultimately your ancestral shamanic spirits are your teachers. But these are things that there are things that you wouldn't learn from them perhaps until it was like too late. Like you wouldn't know that until you tried to call on them in the presence of some, enemy spirit. And then
Right.
all ish breaks out and it's like, oh, I can't do that. But it might be kind of a little too late to
Right.
realize that now.
So nowadays, before anything happens, they have to check, are the spirits compatible and is the astrological information compatible? Of course, we're using Eastern astrology, but even if our elemental aspects conflict, then that could create complications.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So good to know. So this is definitely the type of walk that you are going to want guidance with, and you are going to want to connect with elders. One of our viewers is commenting about being adopted, which is something that I resonate with very deeply as someone who is also adopted. And so I wasn't planning on talking about that, but thank you, Monica, for bringing that up because I do think that's a kind of important thing to touch on for someone who might be of these lineages and have this blood, but be adopted and otherwise maybe disconnected from the community or at a loss for where they could find elders that could guide them. Have you encountered that or have any thoughts on how someone who maybe is of Mongolian descent but adopted into a non-Mongolian family and where they could go for guidance here?
So it's actually interesting that you bring it up because what I come across, this particular topic, not as much, but I feel like a similar one that comes up are a lot of young, especially Asian Americans, who are disconnected from their roots. I think they, similarly, they don't know how to connect, with their heritage or even how to find it because of the disconnect. And so one thing that, I'll first tell the traditional answer, which is going to sound a little BS. The traditional answer is that you do the spiritual work that you can, and if your karma is good, it'll just happen.
Right. A teacher will find you. A leader will find you.
Or you'll somehow find them. And
right.
Yeah. So to make it a little bit more practical, I do think that part of that where that answer has merit is that if you do engage in safe spiritual practices, that builds up your spiritual and your magical muscles to the point where as you get stronger, as you get experienced, you'll you'll basically keep getting closer and closer. And ultimately, even if you don't know who your, ancestral, spirits are, at some point you have the ability to be able to not only call out to them, call out to what, I referenced earlier, the household guardian spirit, or the lineage protector. But ultimately, the way that spirits in general, including ancestral spirits, the way they find us, and this is going to sound funny, the way they find us is actually how we smell, or specifically how our blood smells. And this is how they actually say that there's a saying that spirits are relatively blind, but their sense of smell is super strong. So and this is one of the ways in which, no matter where we travel in the world, this is how our ancestral spirits find us. It's because they're able to, because of that, that blood link, they're able to find, they're able to identify their descendants. And as we sort of build up our own spiritual practice, we're going to be able to better recognize them. And I do want to place an emphasis on very safe practices. Fun fact that I noticed, in terms of, there's people who pursue witchcraft, and then there's people who pursue core shamanism just by itself. I often notice that people who end up practicing witchcraft tend to have better spiritual health and hygiene than people who only do core shamanism and nothing else. And this is because I think witchcraft in the West has gone to a point where there is enough structure where you approach these gods or these particular spirits, and those are known to be helpful entities. And by, forming a relationship with them, you develop a natural protection and natural assistance from known trusted entities. Whereas core shamanism, the way that it's taught in the West, with people who go on the shamanic journeys and stuff, to me, it sounds almost like a Craigslist, of spirits.
Right.
Yeah.
Whoever. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would say, if you're engaged in, if people who are engaged in a spiritual practice, whether it's witchcraft or in general, just, building up that muscle, building up that, that connection, you'll eventually notice that your senses start to become better honed to be able to identify spirits, to the point where you can even, call out to, helpful ancestral spirits, and they'll be able to recognize you and show up, and you'll be able to recognize them. So that's kind of a little bit of, the long-winded answer a little bit.
No, but that's really great. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because if you're somebody who is interested in witchcraft, I think there's kind of like the rough and dirty way of approaching it, where it's just like, I just want to cast spells, or like, I just want to like have power or whatever. But I think that as a collective, we very much have moved away from that, where folks who are interested in witchcraft are a lot more inclined to, at the very least, be curious, if not willing to really dive deep into the spiritual element of what it is that they are doing. Why does this spell work? Where's the message in this tarot card? Like, where is it coming from that I'm intuning these messages? I feel that witches have moved a little bit away from focusing so much on just the like behaviors and the actions of a witch, to the lifestyle and the spiritual enlightenment for each individual that can happen. Doesn't have to be a part of it, but that can be a part of like your witchcraft practice. And so it's really interesting to hear that if you already kind of start going down that path, then you are building relationships with energies and beings that are protective, that are healing, that are benevolent and guiding. And so that might make the next step into connecting with ancestral shamanic spirits a little easier, or something that you're better prepared for, I guess, because you've gotten some like exposure to these concepts and some of the practices there.
Yeah, well, I do want to make an additional comment in that within shamanic practice, there's sort of an open secret. And because I say open secret, because some people say it's secret, some people say, no, it's obvious, everyone figures this out. There's a formula in terms of how we do spiritual connections. And we actually, like earlier, I mentioned that, because a lot of the higher gods in North Asia are, absent sometimes. We rely on connections with ancestral spirits, and that actually helps bridge us to the higher power, even higher powers that we might not be able to reach. And there is also an additional element where, in my introduction, I mentioned, with the land spirits. And one thing I'll quickly mention is that within our belief, land spirits are the only spiritual entities that are indigenous to the physical world. Like, even our own souls are not from the physical world originally. I think every spiritual mythology says they came from somewhere else. And yeah, so because land spirits are the only spirits that are indigenous to the physical world, they naturally serve as a connection between the physical and the spiritual very easily, to the point where we actually say that it is very difficult to maximize your relationship with ancestral spirits if your relationship with land spirits is lacking, because they actually help connect the bridge. So that's why we are very diligent in making sure that we have we have a relationship with the land spirit, of the spirits of the land that are around us, because that will strengthen the ancestral connection. And then what I often tell people, especially in the witchcraft community, is that if you have a strong relationship with ancestral spirits, your relationship with other gods are naturally become stronger as well. It's all connections and stepping points. Now, for people who are not very connected with their ancestors, but they have started forming relationships with higher gods and higher powers, the same way works in between. They can help coordinate the in-between relationships as well. So it's basically the formula is basically us, land spirits, ancestral spirits, higher gods and powers, and basically utilizing that that chain link. It will ultimately enhance our own, not only just our own spiritual practice, but our own spiritual well-being as well.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for articulating that formula and those sort of levels of spirit connection that we can have, and also pointing out that it doesn't have to be in a linear way though. We could perhaps start at one point where we're connecting with higher gods and deities, and that could allow us to connect with other spirits, ancestor spirits or land spirits, or maybe we start with land spirits and they can help kind of foster the relationship with higher deities. And wherever you start along the way, you can, and the others can kind of lead you where you need to go with the other relationships.
And the higher deities, if you have a relationship with them, the higher deities, they want this, because if this is possible, then you can talk to them better.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really beautiful, because that's how it showed up for me in my life. But now the whole point of this podcast is better witching, right? We're trying to help the next witch go about this journey a lot easier. And I can say from experience, it took me many, many, many years for that to become clear to me. And for a long time as an adopted kid, I really thought that connecting with my ancestors was something that would be impossible, because I couldn't identify any of them and still can't identify most of them. And I was very much struggling with what to do about that. And it took a long time for me to realize that the spiritual, what people might call your spiritual court or your spiritual team, the whole group of all the spirits that you're connected with, can make introductions essentially, or help foster relationships with other areas of your spiritual team. Because really at the very, very, very boiled down end of it, they're all parts of you. They're all sort of connected to the spirit that is you. So it's almost like your right hand, introducing you to your left foot or something like that, where it's it's a part of you. So if you get to know one, there's a really good chance that by doing so, you will learn more about the other parts of yourself. And that's exactly what happened for me. And when I made a connection with one ancestor from there, and this is an adopted ancestor as well, not a blood ancestor, but when I made a connection with the spirit of that ancestor, other ancestors, adopted and otherwise, that I did not know, became revealed to me, and all of a sudden I'm getting random information. And this is going to sound like wild to people, because I don't even know if I've shared this with a lot of my viewers, because I'm still like in it. But I connected with the ancestor of my adopted grandfather.
Okay.
He's kind of like the head of the crew in my mind. He kind of leads the team. And within a year of doing that, I have spent my entire life not knowing anything about my biological family, adopted in the 80s, everything's under seal, no clue, no idea, no information. Within a year, I had the name of my biological mother.
Oh, wow.
This happened in my early 30s. So 30 years. I had gone to courthouses. I had searched directories. I had registered myself on various adoption directories, all with the hopes of hearing something from my biological family, and nothing. And when I established a connection with my adopted grandfather, kind of on a dare to myself, I literally was at a point where I was just kind of frustrated with how much people talked about ancestry and how important it was to being a witch. And I was like, I'm going to prove these people wrong, because I'm a badass witch and I don't know shit about my biological family, and I don't have an ancestral practice, and there's no way you need it, because obviously I'm doing just fine without it. And I kind of established it just to sort of prove, I guess, to myself that like nothing would change. And I was very wrong about that. I established that relationship with my grandfather. And the next thing you know, here I am looking at a computer screen with the first and last name of my biological mother. And so those introductions definitely will happen. And then after that, there have been several spirit guides and other deities and other beings that I now have relationships with, that I know are only real for me now because of that first initial connection with my adopted grandfather. So that is, I'm just really glad you articulate that, because that's literally what I've been living, but wouldn't necessarily know to explain it that way. So for anybody who is adopted, estranged from your family, or if there's some type of break in your lineage or history where you're not exactly sure what spirits you are connected with, I think what David and I are both saying is that all of your spirits themselves are sort of in some way kind of like connected to each other. And so whether you start with the spirits of the land, or you start with ancestors, or you start with deities, by developing a genuine relationship with these spirits, they can foster connections to the ones that you maybe know less about or are a little disconnected from. And you can go about that in an intentional way. So rather than being like, oh, your teachers will find you, blah, 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 you can say, okay, I would like to know more about the spirits that lead me in this area that I feel drawn to. Let me establish a connection with the spirits that I do have access to, that are more readily available to me, and allow them to assist me in making connections with more spirits. And perhaps they will lead me to the spirits that are, that explain why I like to throw bones, or, feel really called to the tarot, or whatever the case may be. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah. I mean, very similarly, early in my practice, I had a vague connection with ancestors, like just very, 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 very weak, very vague. And it was actually the connection that I had with them connected me with physical people who then connected me with other physical people, who then led to my connections in Mongolia and Korea and Manchuria. And they then helps to delineate and define and really clarify who these ancestral spirits were that even began this process in the first place. So it's
so the path might not just be spirit to spirit to spirit. It might be spirit leading you to a person, to a place, to a group, a community, or whatever, and then they foster that. So it's just, kind of just leading you on your path, and making sure you hit those stones, I guess, those stepping stones.
Yeah, and just to touch on some of the some of the things that you said. I mean, if we look at anything or any of this, like, to the views that you used to hold, technically we don't need any of this and we could still be doing fine. But as humans, we hunger for connection, right? And then ultimately achieving that connection just only serves to empower us more. So if we don't have it, we're fine. But if we really want to, build up that connection that we hunger for and build up our own, personal power and, power over and control over our own lives and such, this all is just serves to enhance that.
Wow. Yeah. I love that. I want to remind folks that they have an opportunity to get their questions answered by David here today. So if there are any burning questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat or in the Q&A box. And while folks are doing that, I did want to talk a little bit about the connection between shamanism and witchcraft, or shamans and witches, because our community is primarily made up of folks who identify with that word in some way, whether they call themselves witches or just feel like their practices are similar, etc. And what I'm really curious about is whether or not there is a acceptance of that terminology in the shamanic communities, because I know that a lot of indigenous groups, spiritual or otherwise, because of the negative connotations of what a witch is, at least in recent history and recent language, there's oftentimes a very strong opposition to being called a witch or having their practices labeled as witchcraft. So do you see a distinction between witchcraft and shamanism? And in shamanic circles, are people open to the idea of being referred to as witches or calling themselves that? Or do you see a line being drawn there?
So it's a little bit mixed because, well, I'll first start this way. Within the Western circles, especially people who call themselves shamans or shamanic practitioners, yes, there is still very much an opposition to witchcraft. They almost see it as they almost look at it condescendingly.
Right.
It's almost like not so much that it's evil, but it's more of, oh, these are kids who haven't grown up yet. And because a lot of the Western core shamanic practices, they emerged from the 70s and 80s, and those people are now in their 60s or 70s, and they see this recent witchcraft wave, and they still see a youngins thing. So that's kind of the Western shamanic circle view. If you look at traditional societies, there's still an unfamiliarity with what the word means. Like they're like, what like what's a witch? What's witchcraft?
Right.
Because they see it as spiritual practice, and when they look at some of the things that people who practice witchcraft in the West, what they do, they're like, oh, that's like what this spiritual role does, or that's kind of like what that spiritual role does. Like it's like this spiritual herbalist, or this bone setter, or this. So they're able to make that connections. In terms of the word witchcraft, it's still, from a traditional standpoint, a little bit unfamiliar. I think the most familiarity is when the word gets used in like movies. So that's kind of what. So there's still a lack of understanding of what witchcraft actually is within traditional shamanic groups. And I think those who have tried to engage with people in the West, they often engage with those core shamanic practitioners who are 60, 70 years old, and so they hear this condescending view more than anything else. So it's a little bit, it definitely is unfortunate, because I mean, growing up in the US, I definitely studied a witchcraft and Western witchcraft as well, and it's still in a way almost an insular practice to specific communities in the Western world. And I think there is, especially with the younger generation, there is an attempt to share with the world what it actually is. And I think that's just an ongoing process. It's part of what I'm trying to do. It's very clear to me that, you know, the publisher of my book primarily publishes witchcraft books, and
Right.
so a lot of the events and the community things that I go to are witchcraft oriented and not so much shamanic oriented, and so it's kind of part of part of what I'm trying to do is try to help, you know, bridge these communities a little bit better, acknowledging that they are different traditions, they are different practices, but I do believe that they can serve to help implement and enhance each other. For example, if it were not for, you know, studying witchcraft, I would not be nearly as familiar as the many different types of herbs that are used
Right.
within magical practice. Because in shamanic practice, we use herbs, but there's usually like 2 to 3 that are publicly known, and then there's about, you know, 20 others that are considered a secret. So because of that, you know, within shamanic spaces, there's not a lot of talk about, you know, herbal practices within spirituality and within magical practice.
Right.
So I do think that there's a lot that these traditions can share with each other and to help enhance each other's practices. Like within witchcraft spaces, I'm constantly surprised about the lack of awareness of land spirits. On one witchcraft practices with someone who's considered an elder in the witchcraft circle, I brought up the concept of land spirits, and their question to me was, "Are you referring to elementals?" And I'm like,
Not quite. No, I'm
yeah,
not.
I mean,
Right.
sometimes maybe, but not really.
Right. No. That surprises me too. I wonder if that's just like just the nature of like my own education, um or what have you, that land spirits are something that I'm more familiar with in my own personal life than with the elementals. Though I will say I certainly learned about the elementals first. Just coming into my practice in the 90s and having, you know, Wiccan books being like the primary thing that you could get your hands on. And I'm still Wiccan, but having that be my start, obviously in Wicca, there's a lot more emphasis on the elementals than there are on land spirits, at least in the writing that was happening at that time. So I formally was introduced to elementals, but they didn't really speak too deeply to me. And when I started really actually practicing the things that I was learning about, it was the spirits of the land that I really connected with. And I think that could also have something to do with, well, first of all, my family being from Charleston and having the land spirits there be of a very heavy energy that I think if you're sensitive to spirits in general, you will notice. It's palpable. People talk about that when you go to New Orleans, you go to Charleston, you go to some of these places where there's been a lot of bloodshed, a lot of tragedy that is almost sort of like soaked up into the land, and then kind of reverberating out of the trees and out of the grass and out of the waterways. You can feel that. And so it's like, what is going on here? This is not elementals. You know, this is not a fire. This is not a fire energy. This is like someone, I don't know, you know, what this is like. So there's that, but then also growing up in an urban environment, which some of you unfortunately might be able to hear in the background because the Bronx is Bronxing. But being in an urban environment, having to look for places where you can feel that connection to nature a little bit more readily, and then understanding why you need it and what's happening to me when I go and I find a tree in a place where there are not a lot of trees, and I feel like I have to sit with it or put my back up against it or put my bare feet on its roots. Like, what is happening there? What am I connecting to there? So all of these different elements and experiences in my own life might be why I was educated on elementals first, but established a connection with land spirits in my actual life. And that does actually surprise me a little bit to hear. But I think that's important and a great way for folks to begin spirit communication, kind of just to go back to like the adopted question and things like that. Connecting with the spirits of the land is a great way to begin spirit communication and relationships if perhaps starting with your ancestry is maybe not an option or not desirable or something like that. And what I hear you saying, David, is that starting there is just fine, because if it is for you to also interact with shamanic ancestral spirits, those land spirits might actually help to get you on that journey and bring you closer to making the relationship with the shamanic ancestral spirits that you want to connect with.
Right.
So that's really
Although one
helpful.
thing I'll add is that, one thing I'll add is that land spirits, though, you do have to be slightly careful with them because they are a bit temperamental. So
Right.
within our traditions, when we actually engage with land spirits, we almost like pour on the compliments thick to, to try to be as, almost like overdo it with how beautiful the land is, the mountains, the river. Like we really lay it deep, because with land spirits, they're actually more easily offended than other types of spirits, especially including compared to ancestors. So that's one thing that I'll say. And with land spirits, you almost always have to give an offering of some kind, because it's you want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward with them, because if they get offended, they're probably more petty than your petty ancestors.
Right, exactly. And I can sort of like understand that too. Like if I were a spirit of the land, and folks were just like coming to me with like their concerns and their desires and like burying their like, petition papers in me and stuff, I'd be like, bro, like, who are you? You know what I'm saying? Show a little respect. So I love that. That's a really good point for folks to remember. Let's see if we have some questions, if you don't mind hanging out for a couple more minutes to take a few of those. Thank you guys for getting your questions in. If you are listening to this recording on all major podcast platforms, one of the benefits of tuning in to these live tapings on the Beyond BronxWitch YouTube channel is that you get to participate in these Q&As and have your questions perhaps answered live on the show. So do consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, Beyond BronxWitch. We'd love to have you. So let's see what we've got for questions. I want to first address one of the first questions that I saw come in the chat from Sean's Bow, which asks, are people born shaman? And I just wanted to touch on that because we did spend quite a bit of the start of the show talking about that question. It's not necessarily an easy yes or no question, though yes. So I encourage you, Sean's Bow, to go back to the beginning of this episode and give that a listen. I think you'll find that very informative. Go ahead.
I'll add a detail to that. I mean, short answer is yes, but essentially because you're chosen by spirits when you're born, you are born with the potential with the possibility of being or also with the destiny of being a shaman, but you're not actually a shaman until you go through that initiation, training, and empowerment process. Basically, before that, you're basically in a stage where you are either, in my introduction, the word sagasha actually means cocoon. You haven't emerged yet. Or ongo tenkerte is someone who has shamanic spirits, but they haven't gone through the initiation yet. So you're not born with the ability to do things already. You're born with that possibility and that destiny. And if things work out, if you have the karma for it, you'll become a shaman at a point in your life.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope that answers your question, Sean's Bow. And definitely go back to the start of the episode where we talk more about the origins of shamanism in your own life and in general. So I appreciate that very, very much. Let me take a quick look at the Q&A to see if anybody's dropped any questions there. But we do have one in the chat. And this is coming from Hendrix Suravitno. Is shamanism and curanderismo the same thing? I'm not sure if you're familiar with curanderismo, but healing in Latin cultures. Would you say that there is a similarity or a connection between that? I'm actually glad that this person posed the question. Thank you, Hendrix, because I did want to talk about shamanism and healing, because that is something that we usually think of first. When it comes to like the shaman is the healer of the village or community. And so curanderismo being essentially spiritual healing in Latin cultures. Would you say that shamanism is a healing modality as well?
So here's where it gets complicated. Shamans can and often are healers, but they're not necessarily innately healers in the sense that we usually think about. A shaman's real, I guess, purpose is to maintain and preserve balance within within the community's relationship to spirits, the community's relationships with each other, the spirits' relationships with each other. Their whole point is balance, and healing often does come into play. But sometimes shamans are, based off the spirits that they have, might not do healing work so much as they do almost like wrathful or aggressive work, such as battling hostile spirits that are
Wow.
coming in. Or they can, in some cases, it happens all the time. There's a unhealthy spiritual attachment, and you have to bribe it to go away. Or sometimes, actually, there are stories of people who they call it a thief spirit, but it's more like a Robin Hood spirit kind of thing, where so that's the work that they do. Oftentimes, most shamans do have a basic training of spiritual healing to some extent, but some are more experts in it, others are not so experts. So that's what I'll say in terms of shamanism and just healing in general. What we often do is we often do diagnose if someone does have an issue of what type of condition that they have. Like we actually divide all conditions and sicknesses into 4 types. It's either the first type, which is all you need is just rest and fluids, basically a cold. Second type is it's not spiritual, just take some medicine. Third type is, okay, this is actually a spiritually caused sickness. We need to do a ceremony, a spiritual work, and take medicine because you need both.
Right.
And then the fourth type is karmic, which is it's untreatable. The best thing we can do is try to alleviate it as much as possible, but it's karmic. It won't be able to go away. So basically, depending on the 4 that we're able to diagnose, then we might prescribe a treatment. We might not, depending on what the condition is. So to that extent, yes, there is a lot of healing work. One thing that I'll notice about what I have noticed among traditions that are ATRs or from Latin America, one thing I found very interesting is if I look at those practices and the people within those practices, I can confidently say that their traditions are not quote unquote shamanic, and that they were not built around the concept of a shaman as we know it. But that being said, I do notice, and other people have noticed, that occasionally we come across individuals from these cultures that to us appear to be a shaman. So in a sense, we'll say, this is interesting. This person to us looks like a shaman within a non-shamanic spirituality, because of we notice that they have spirits, like ancestral spirits who work with them in a way that we would see as shamanic, that they appear to have been there since they were born, so chosen. And we have noticed that in some cases, not everyone, but some individual cases, they have to be in the priesthood or they'll suffer or they'll die. In which case we're like, and this isn't the case for everyone, it's just some people within their priesthood. So we look at that and we're like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So,
when you first said that, that was something that I noticed, because I have heard that as well, where in certain lineages there may be spiritual, I don't know, gifts, for lack of a better word, or roles that that you are supposed to play. I guess maybe perhaps if you subscribe to the idea that we kind of choose what we are supposed to do in this humanly life, and we come here with like an intention and a lesson to learn and a role to play. I have heard in other cultures, as in other traditions, where folks talk about not answering that call could be detrimental to you. It's not really something that you get to just be like, yeah, I'll do it. It's not like going to the mall on the weekends. It's something that the longer you go without answering the call, the more difficult your life might become.
Yeah. So this is why, I've come across some people who, with the best intentions, they say that only people from Siberia or only people from North Asia can call themselves shamans. And we see where they're coming from. We respectfully disagree in that, because we have a set definition, that phenomenon could occur anywhere. The only difference is within North Asia, we built our spirituality around that concept, whereas in other places, they did not. But that being said, if enough generations within a family lineage are deep spiritual workers, and they are very attached to their descendants and making sure that they do certain things, to the point of choosing them when they're born, to the point of possessing them, to the point of requiring them to do certain works, and in exchange empower them to do certain things, to us, that tells us, that signals to us the emergence of a shamanic lineage within a culture that didn't necessarily have shamanism as its main spiritual theme or function within that tradition. So technically, I've come across it. I mean, it's not common. I don't want to like make the thing where it's popping up everywhere, but every now and then I do come across these individuals in non-North Asian cultures that have this phenomenon, and within their cultural framework, they do what it is they do because that's what their ancestors are demanding, and it basically fulfills the role that a shaman would within our cultures. But even though the tradition is not it's not shamanism, it's almost like the relationship and the condition that they have with their ancestral spirits, it's going in that direction. We actually see that as potentially the birth of a shamanic lineage.
Okay. Wow. Thank you for explaining that, Hendrix. Thank you, Hendrix. I appreciate you so much. That's really beautiful. Sending a super chat. I very much appreciate it. Podcast people don't get paid. So thank you very much. And I hope that answers your questions. I hope that super chat, thank you, is because your question was answered there. Because I do think that is an important one, that there are these commonalities that feel shamanic in other cultures, but like you said, those traditions were not necessarily centered around shamanism as their primary modality or the center of how they structured their spiritual life and their community life at large, and so therefore would not, by technical terms, be considered shamans or shamanic practices. But we see some of these similar I guess, elements to how somebody's spiritual life might play out. And one of them could be having this type of call in their lives to serve a certain role in their communities, that by not serving that role could result in consequences, for lack of a better word, that are similar to what someone connected to ancestral shamanic spirits might experience if they also don't serve the role that has kind of become clear as a part of their walk on this earth.
This is the reason why traditional shamans in North Asia occasionally do take on students that are not North Asian. They might be from the US, they might be from Europe, because they looked at their lineage, they see something that's happening that looks like the emergence of a shamanic lineage, and they'll be like, okay, we'll show you what it is we do, and it will explain the reasons why we do these things, and then you need to figure out how it translates to your culture and your ancestry. So that you can live a good life and you can serve your community in the way that particular ancestor is demanding that you do. It's
beautiful. That's good to know. I think that's helpful, because I imagine that sometimes people might see North Asian shamans and elders maybe take on non-Asian students and say, what's that about? I thought this was something I had to be born with. So that helps to clarify what's happening there. There's a specific reason why that might happen and what's going on there. We've got one more question coming in. If you have a moment, have either of you experienced a spiritual or supernatural encounter that has changed your view or belief about any current religion, deity, or faith that you once believed in? That's a very specific question. Give some thought to that.
I mean, this is probably not the best answer that people like to hear, but I was raised atheist. So
Okay.
I was raised in a
So all of it.
Yeah.
All of it has challenged what you were raised to believe, right? Okay.
Yeah. No, because my family we're from an area that was communist, and even though my family are not communist by any way, shape, or form, there is an implied cultural change that happens, and one of those cultural changes is skepticism in anything spiritual, religious. It's all seen as, backwoods superstition,
Right.
and so basically it's, having grown up with that and having grown up in a very science, technology, like STEM family, it's have this concept of, with working with spiritual entities, that they exist and that they've proven to me that they exist. It basically was, in a way, it forced me to reevaluate my worldview. One thing that I kind of appreciate within my tradition is that we, in some ways, we're very flexible and practical in how we look at, spirits and deities, not only just within our own traditions, but in other traditions as well, to the point that we recognize that spirits and gods and practices are different everywhere, because not only are humans different everywhere, but spirits are different everywhere. Spirits have their own cultures too, and they have their own practices. So certain things are going to work for one group that are not going to work for another group. So if anything, it's one other thing that's made me wonder about, I don't know about if I would use the word question, but maybe wonder about, are why sometimes certain spiritualities are very rigid in the way that you have to do things this way, you have to do things that way. Literally, when there was this one communication between, it might have been the Pope or some other bishop or whatever, and then the Manchurian leader that controlled China at the time, they're like, you need to worship God and Jesus and blah, blah, blah. And then the response was, you worship heaven your way, we worship it our way.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's basically, we're working with different spiritual entities. If we do things your way, our entities are not going to recognize it. They're not going to know what's happening.
Yeah. Well, I think it all just comes back to a relationship. Like if I walked up to someone who spoke a different language, trying to have a relationship with them is going to be very different than if I speak the language that they understand. So it isn't, to me, so wild. And I think one of the things that is important to me as a modern day practitioner and someone who teaches other witches is to help folks understand that the idea that magic, spirituality, witchcraft, healing, that all of these things are somehow separate from science is not the case. And so what is true in the physical world, the principles that we have seen proven in the physical world, are true in the spiritual and energetic world as well. And we might not be able to quantify it or empirically describe it the way we could with, a science experiment in a lab. But to me, the principles still apply. And so if in the physical world, if not speaking the same language as someone is going to make developing a relationship with them difficult, I see no reason why it wouldn't be the same in the spiritual world. So that makes perfect sense to me. And I think, to answer Sharon's question, just because it was also posed to me, I would say the experience that I was sharing with you guys about encountering the spirit of my deceased adopted grandfather. I was long not a Christian by the time that this happened, because this happened in my 30s, and I started learning about witchcraft when I was 12, and I officially, left the church, if you will, at 16. So it's been a long time of me not identifying as a Christian, and realizing that the principles and beliefs held by Christians do not resonate with me and are not my own. But I will say that was probably one of the first times the first time that I had an experience where I was like, okay, the idea that you die and you go away into some heaven world that is separate from this one is not the case. Because this man with no body is standing in my living room in front of me right now. And I can feel him as real as I did when we were at the dinner table when I was a child. I had always been open to that idea. Obviously, getting into witchcraft at 12 years old, you're probably kind of open to the idea that there's something beyond the human body, and that when you die, you don't just disappear in some, in all ways. But I don't think it was until that experience that I really, really in my own life had that real understanding that they are still with me, that they're in a very real way. Like, there may not be a physical body, I may not be able to reach out and touch or see with my human eyes, but in a very real way, the spirit that I once identified as my grandfather in living form, in physical form, is right here with me right now. Something in this room has changed. The corner of the room is not the same as right here in the room. That was just a really real moment for me. So if there were any doubts, I guess, or uncertainty about that experience definitely solidified for me that we don't just cease to exist when our physical bodies die. So I hope that answers your question, Shans. And I think that is all the time that we have for questions right now. So I first want to remind everyone that David has an incredible book that you are definitely going to want to check out if this conversation is interesting to you. So much information in here that goes beyond the conversation that we had. Spirit Voices, The Mysteries and Magic of North Asian Shamanism, published from Wiser Books. We have copies of it in the shop here at HQ. We're very honored to have David's writings on our shelves, but you can certainly also find the book from other major book suppliers and wherever it is that you would find books. If you are in the New York City area, I want to invite you to come to the shop on Saturday, February 10th from 1 to 3 p.m. because David is going to be here and going to be treating us to a book signing and private chat. There are 2 tiers of tickets available to this event. General admission will allow you to spend some time getting your book signed from 2 to 3 p.m. But if you would like to spend more time with David, enjoy a reading of some excerpts from the book, some complimentary snacks, and the ability to ask more questions. And I encourage you to go ahead and get the VIP ticket. You'll be able to come down from 1 to 2, spend that intimate time with us, and you will also get a complimentary signed copy of the book with your ticket. It'll be waiting for you when you get here. If you are a Coven Community Witch, then you are going to be treated to a live stream of that private chat that's totally free. So if you are a Coven Community Witch, just click on the events tab on the day of and tune in to the live stream. If you're not a Coven Community Witch and you are interested in becoming a member, just check the description box on this video for the links, or you can go to bronxwitch.com/online and gain access to our online portal where you will find the Coven community. So I want to give you an opportunity, David, to let the folks know if there's anything else we should be paying attention to, or if there's a best way to connect with you and your offerings. How would you like folks to maybe reach out for more?
Sure. I mean, at this point, I'm probably the best way to reach out to me or follow what I do is through Instagram. So, my handle, I don't know if I'm able to type in the chat or
yeah, go right ahead. Yeah, I'll type it in the chat for
Okay,
folks. I
cool. Thank
gotcha.
you. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you can follow me there. I regularly post, whether it's some interesting information related to my book, or just some pictures from my travels or whatever.
Yeah.
This is actually within the first year. My appearance at BronxWitch AQ is going to be my first event of the year. Afterwards, afterwards I do have some other events. If anyone is attending, the Convocation event in Michigan, I'll be at that. I'll be doing a couple book signings and appearances in various places in Connecticut. Still maybe a Denver trip, very possibly, not sure yet. But yeah, I mean, I post everything on my Instagram anyways. It's usually within the story highlights. So I mean, for just to follow what I do, that's probably the best way to keep up with what I'm up to.
Beautiful. Yeah. So Spirit Voices is going on tour, folks. So definitely follow David on Instagram at DavidJShe311. So you can keep in touch with that and perhaps if you're not able to come to HQ for the book signing on February 10th, maybe you can connect with David at some of the other events and appearances that he will be doing in 2024. That would be super wonderful. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. I want to thank you so much, David, for being with us today. This has been an incredibly educational and enlightening conversation on a topic that I think most of us witches know very little about. And what we do know is often, missing some key information. I think you did a really great job of filling in the holes, certainly for me. So I hope that our viewers and watchers feel the same way. I learned so much about the topic of being a shamanic witch, and just reminding everybody that these conversations are important because when we know better, we witch better. All right. Thank you so much, David. Yay!
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, this was fantastic. I really appreciate you. Like I said, this episode is going to be available on my YouTube now, essentially. So if you want to share it with folks, feel free to snag the link to it and share it with people. But the actual podcast episode will air in the spring, and I will be in touch by email with the link to that once that is available. But if anything comes up in between, feel free to reach out to me. And of course, I'm going to see you on the 10th, which I'm looking forward to. We've already got some ticket sales. So nice. I know we're going to have a few people in the room. So I'm excited for it to be a fun event. I'm going to go ahead and let you go out of the stream room. Like I said, if you have any alerts that say don't close your browser, if you don't mind leaving your browser open for a few minutes. Yeah. Otherwise, I'll have to harass you by email and make you log back in and all that noise. Nobody wants that. But yeah, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll be in touch soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Bye. Have a great day. Blessed be. All right. Awesome. That was amazing, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. That was fantastic. I was excited about this conversation because we've definitely talked about a lot of different topics that I think witches are interested in. But some of them might be things that you're familiar with generally. And I think shamanism is one that a lot of us probably are not so familiar with. So that is really, really great. Before we get out of here, you guys know the drill. I'm going to go ahead and read the outro, and don't forget y'all are at work. All right, so don't rush out of here because I need y'all to tell me how it sounds and all that good stuff. So don't log off just yet. Y'all are still on the clock, okay? I'm going to let the sirens going by go ahead and finish out. Just in case. Jeanette said, good stuff, very informative. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed that. I certainly did. Hendrik said, one of my favorite streams for sure. Thank you. Thank you so, so much. Yes. Listen, next year, you guys have to nominate this podcast for a witchy. Okay. Do you guys know about the occult awards, the media and occult awards run by Modern Witch? If you don't, Google it. Okay. It's too late to nominate me for this year, but next year, nominate me for a witchy. This show might win. All right, here we go. Thank you, witches, for tuning in to this episode of Season 3 of the Better Witch podcast. Remember, no matter where you're tuning in from, we want to know what you think about today's episode. So make sure to leave us a review wherever you are. A special thank you to our sponsors who made this episode possible. You can support this podcast by grabbing some sweet merch over in the Beyond BronxWitch merch shop, sponsoring an episode with an ad spot, or following us on Instagram at BetterWitch Podcast. Remember, witches, when we know better, we witch better. See you in the next episode, and blessed be. All right, folks. Thank you, witches. Appreciate you so much. Let me know how that sounded. Was that good? No bumps in the background. I feel like it's only when I want to record that like everyone in the world wants to walk through the lobby of the shop and like open and close the door. Leslyn says that was good. Awesome. Leslyn, your package is in the mail. It's going out tomorrow, girl. Perfect. Smooth. Awesome. Great. Thank you guys. You guys make wonderful show producers. I appreciate you. All right. I can give you guys the heads up that we are going to be meeting with Lilith Dorsey next. Yes, Lilith Dorsey is coming back. She has a book that is coming out called, I believe, Tarot for the Everyday, where she talks about using tarot cards in other ways other than just with, for divination and things like that. And we are going to be meeting with Lilith next week on February 1st. I believe that's Thursday, February 1st. I'll be logging on at about 12:45, and Lilith will be joining us at about 1:15. So I'll definitely have that up and running for you guys to check out and know that it is coming down the pipeline. But just giving you the heads up, mark your calendars. February 1st, we'll be meeting with Lilith Dorsey and talking about using tarot for magic. All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a beautiful rest of the day, and blessed be.